Welcome to the All of Life podcast from Redemption Church Tempe, where we have conversations on faith, culture, theology, and beyond to help us live all of life, all for Jesus. Let's jump into today's episode.
All right, well, welcome everyone to the All of Life podcast. We are a bunch of knuckleheads who believe that all of life is all for Jesus. And so today we're going to have a fun little debate. We're going to talk about video games. And why are we doing that? We've named this the Summer of Worship and Wonder. We're going to encourage everyone in the church to really ask the questions of what does it look like this summer to really worship God and be filled with wonder at the goodness of his creation. And so I think when a lot of people hear that, they're going to think video games. That's a good way to connect. Well, in our discussions in the hallway, it appears that we have two people who have differing opinions on that, two of the pastors here. So we've got Ryan Arneson, pastor of Campus and Families and Getting Stuff Done. What position are you taking? Just the affirmative or the negative?
I'm the negative.
Yeah. Okay.
I think video games have a predominantly negative effect on people.
All right. And then we got Jake Slebodnik, a.k.a. Rami Malek, a.k.a.
I'll take Rami Malek. That's good.
CrossFit Super Mario.
Yeah.
A.k.a. Young.
I don't even know who that is.
He's the guy who played in that like robot show. And he played Queen in the in the movie. Like
Freddie Mercury?
He played Freddie Mercury.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
All right, so we got Jake over here.
Yep.
And what's your position?
Video games are amazing.
Okay, we go.
They're great. Ryan's wrong.
Well, the guy who's in charge of like caring for families and children over here says they're not, and the dude who has an unnecessary mustache says they're good. So,
unnecessary.
There's no need for that.
This guy, it protects my lip from dust
from your nose.
What's the purpose and function of a mustache? That's another podcast.
All right, so
pure vanity, the same as video games.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, I'm gonna.
It's already getting started. It's already getting started. All right, before we jump into the debate, I'm going to throw out a few statistics.
Okay.
You tell me what you think the number is. All right. Percentage of adults who play video games on a regular basis. Go.
Oh, yeah. 90%.
60%.
It is 43%.
Oh, wow. I was really off.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was a lot closer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's the percent that the percent of all people would be 90%, but like of adults, it's 43.
Oh, you said adults.
Yeah. You
I wasn't listening, bro. I was too quick to answer. I was too excited.
All right, the most common type of video game, like the theme or like the
genre.
The genre, yeah. What do you got?
I would say some type of world building, or world building.
I'm gonna say sports video games because I hate them.
Well, it's not about you.
Well,
so the Earth does not revolve around.
I just
your
don't like them,
preferences.
and I think they probably are the most sports games.
You are so wrong.
Yes, I'm so glad I'm wrong.
So it's puzzle and strategy.
Oh, okay, yeah.
62%.
Okay.
And then after that, you have adventure at 49%. And then you have shooter at 42%.
Okay. These are great.
Yeah. How much money is made off of video games in a year? I got my statistics from 2019.
Okay, cool. I don't know how much, but my guess is it's more than sports. It's more than movies.
Well,
I would say it would be top of all those. I don't know. How much?
Well,
I'm gonna go with $109 billion.
I'm gonna say $250 billion.
Well, it's very anticlimactic because it sits right in between you guys. It's $151 billion.
Wow.
So
all right,
there you go. I'll do one more. And Jake, listen closely because
before I answer.
What percentage of teenage boys own a game console?
98%.
75%.
It is 92%.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. So we've discovered that you guys are somewhat okay at guessing statistics. Jake, not great at listening to questions, but that could be a result of the video games.
It is.
So here's what we're doing with the debate. The question we're asking is, do video games contribute to shalom? Do they contribute to the spiritual, social, physical flourishing of the world? In other words, if video games disappeared, would the world be better off? Or if video games were played in the way that Jake is going to propose that they're going to get played, would the world be better off? Right. So do they contribute to shalom? Now, an easy way to answer that is to just say, well, it depends. But that's boring.
Yeah. No, we're not doing that.
No, we're going to go after like
full extremes.
A real argument.
Only superlatives.
Only superlatives.
That's how we're arguing. Especially me and Ryan.
This will be the best podcast
done
on video games, on a video game debate between Jake and Ryan that's ever happened.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Guaranteed.
Absolutely.
All right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give Jake 3 minutes to make the case for video games. Ryan, 3 minutes to rebut that. When you say rebut and not rebuttal, it just doesn't sound right. But and then we're going to give you each a couple of opportunities to ask each other clarifying questions. Not where you argue, but where you can ask the clarifying questions. And then we'll just have an open discussion about it. So, Jake,
yep.
Why don't you go ahead and start us off, and I'll get my timer ready, and I'll let you know. Go.
Okay. So I think for spiritual, social, and physical flourishing, so just taking those categories, I think the most important is that video games are probably the most potent storytelling medium that is available to human beings on the planet Earth right now. And I think stories in general contribute to the shalom of God's world in a lot of different ways. And it is one of the most fundamental things about how God created human beings. We tell stories to each other. We continue to pass those stories down. And video games have the ability to be, one, fully immersive. They are, rather than like movies or books, they're using every bit of your senses and have the ability to draw you into a game in a deeper way. So, for example, one of my favorite games is Final Fantasy X. It's a role-playing game, so it's basically just it's a story game. And the reason that it tells the story well is you get invested in the characters far deeper because you are one of the characters. And you have sound going on, you have sight going on, but you also have like tactile awareness. Like everything that's happening is because you are inputting into it. The second reason is social. It is a powerful shared experience and has the space to be highly communal. For example, when quarantine hit, me and Lexi got into Zelda Breath of the Wild. So instead of watching any TV or shows, we played a game and just passed the controller back and forth. And everything that it created this powerful like season in life for good memories through a story. And somebody who's been playing this recently is my friend Will, one of the pastors here, and he's been playing with his 2 youngest sons. And they all take turns playing, and they're working through this like fictitious fantasy world that tells this really cool classic story of good versus evil. But it allows in a different way than a book or a movie to come together and engage in a story. Like in a book, you can all share and read the same book, and then afterwards you talk about it, but it's an experience that you're all doing on your own. And a movie is the same thing, but it is limited interaction. You are just watching with your eyes and listening with your ears, and afterwards you can talk about it. But a game is an unfolding story that demands engagement as it's happening, and so all of you can continue to be a part of it. The third thing, physical, I think it could provide rest for our bodies. It is a way to create skill and puzzle solving and development of the brain in different ways. Just to be honest, that last reason is the one I care the least about. I think the best things about video games is their ability to tell stories and their ability to create community and shared experiences. Boom.
You got 3 seconds left. Good
Wow,
work.
dang.
Wow.
Dang.
All right.
There you go.
We got Jake the storyteller. What do you got, Ryan? Let me get the stopwatch going. While I'm getting the stopwatch going, we should discuss the terms here. We forgot to talk about terms. So if Jake wins this debate, so we'll give a way for people to vote.
Yep.
If Jake wins, Ryan does what?
Ryan's gonna play a video game with me. We said Fortnite for I'm gonna say 2 hours.
Oh my gosh.
2 hours. So
Okay.
All right.
you can come over to my place, or I can come over to your place. I'll bring the stuff, and we'll play Fortnite for a couple hours.
All right.
Which I'm not that good at anyway, so we'll both have fun.
Oh, so you're saying I'll suck at it.
You'll suck at it, and I
Okay.
will too.
All right.
Ryan,
Communal share in not being good.
what are the other terms?
Yeah, well, because you upped it to 2 hours,
Yeah.
yeah, I think what we're going to do is I'm going to have to be at your house when you shave your mustache off.
Yeah.
And right after you're done shaving your mustache off, you need to make me a 20-ounce ribeye with the bone in.
Wow.
Okay?
You get 2, huh?
2.
Okay, fine. Deal.
2.
All
There
right.
we go.
I trust the people.
It works. All right. Let's do this. All right, Ryan, go ahead. You got your 3 minutes. Give me the point when you're ready. All right, go.
All right. So, just in my framing of this, we're thinking about this through the lens of shalom and whether or not the world would be a better place without video games. So, I'm going to tell you my perspective first and foremost. So, I'm arguing this point somewhat similar to Jake, mostly experientially. And so, I've spent a lot of time in ministry on the first 13 years of ministry was spent on college campuses, but I also was a college student. And then the last 8 or 9 years has been spent in family and marriage ministry. A few things have stood out in regards to video games. First, I have yet to meet a girl who had problems struggling with video games. And so most of my interactions have been with men who were struggling with video games. And when it gets into marriage and family, it's particularly the husband that has an affinity toward video games. And so I think you see a pretty sharp divide between men and women and their ability to relate with each other based on this topic. I also, in some of my reading of Andy Crouch, by the way, I haven't done like tons and tons of research on this, but Andy Crouch made a very good point a while back about the difference between tools and devices. And he said throughout human history, people would have to develop skills over long periods of time in order to use tools that would have a purpose to influence the shalom or the productivity or anything good that could happen in amongst human beings. And at the introduction of things like video games, like television, like the iPhone, but I would say I agree with you, Jake, that video games are probably the predominant form right now. They are devices that don't take much skill to develop. You can enter into them at a pretty quick pace and get better at them without actually affecting your real life. And I don't want to get too far into this because I would say I'm new to the study of the concept of being in the flow or in the zone, but I would say there's a lot of research being done and a lot of books being written on how to get in the flow, which generally has been understood as a state that you could get into that removes you from all other surrounding states and you focus at a very high level. That was usually equated with long forms of practice, and now it could be done in a matter of a half an hour in life. And I would say that produces a pretty high level of addiction and the ability to disassociate from reality. And I think video games do that better than any other thing. I'm done.
Perfect. All right, Jake, what clarifying questions would you have for Ryan?
Yeah, totally. I think the first one that I'll throw out there is the main argument against video games that I've heard from you and then from other people as well is that they have a high potential of being abused, either mainly through addiction or being like a time pit, like a total time suck.
Yeah.
And because of that, they can get in the way of relationships and families, which I have a long story of that's true even in my life. I've had that experience. So the clarifying question would be just more of a theological one. If something has the potential to be abused, is the most faithful response always to denounce it and remove it?
No.
Why not? When would you not, I guess?
Yeah.
Used all three of your questions
All
right
right.
there.
That's,
No.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I'm partially making a statement based off of a question that I would have for you, but it seems like you're framing video games only in the storytelling concept of how to communicate. So if video games were the only purpose was to communicate a story, which I think you could probably argue to some degree that is true regardless of whether it's the intent or not, then yeah, you could see a value in communicating the right story to people. But I don't think that's the intent of video games, is to communicate the story of God that produces shalom. I think it's a money-making industry that has found out how human beings work, and it's able to manipulate that. Now, theologically, you're asking the question, does that mean you denounce it completely? I don't think I would say I'm arguing that video games should be denounced completely, but I would say that if they were removed, there wouldn't be much of a detrimental effect on people's lives.
Ryan, throw a question Jake's way. Clarifying question.
So I guess I just kind of did throw the question this way, but I'll rephrase it. Are you saying that all video games, the true benefit of all video games is that they are a storytelling medium that affects people, I guess, either positively or negatively?
Sure. Yeah. I think that's not the only benefit of video games, but I think it is the most powerful and potent one. And say your question again. I'm losing myself.
So is the storytelling medium, like what you were saying earlier, is that the main reason for video games?
Yeah.
And I'll tack on one more thing too.
Sure.
If so, are they telling more of a good story or more of a negative story?
That's a great point.
Seriously. I think it is I don't know if in the video game industry, it is the main focus always. Because there are video games that have no interest in telling a story that I do think still have some good things. And I think that they would be their ability to bring community together as a shared experience. I want to say just personally, I think the best thing about video games is that they can tell a story.
Okay.
And then I would also say there are examples of good storytelling and bad storytelling in all forms of art. And I would because of that never say art, if you remove it, you'd just be better off because of the risk of bad storytelling or addiction or a negative thing. Like, for example, if we were going to take it to movies or books, there are books that do a horrible job at telling the story of the world in any way that resembles God's good story. And within the medium of novel writing and just the fiction novel. And that, I would say, is not a reason to just denounce reading novels.
Yeah.
I would say it would be a good encourager for learning how to critique and thoughtfully ask questions about novels. So in video games, I think there are good video games and good examples of storytelling, video games designed to create community. And then there's examples of really bad ones that do exactly what you said, that they are designed to manipulate into time wasting for the sake of monetary like gain. And what I want to say is just completely removing them wouldn't be something that would be better off. One, because it's not really an option. But two, it eliminates a good art medium that God is allowed to flourish on the earth that has some good in it. And instead of looking at it and going like, what are good questions to ask and engaging it with that way.
All right. Let's kind of focus our discussion around the storytelling theme for a moment.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to ask to you, Jake, is you talked about good stories and bad stories and those sorts of things. What are the themes that people would look for in a good story that are echoes of the biblical story? And what are some of the themes of a bad or distorted story? You know, because I think one of the powerful points that Ryan implied in his question was just because it's a good storytelling medium doesn't mean it's a good thing, because if you're being told a bad story, that could be one of the most potent, negatively spiritually forming things that exist. So
I agree.
What needs to be looked for?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think what you have to have within it, and the reason I would be for video games is I think there are good examples. If there were none, then I would be like, it's probably not good.
Well, you got to give us some.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just give some real life examples. Something on the PlayStation 4 that came out in the last like 5 years was a game called Horizon Zero Dawn. And it basically plunged you in a world that was post-apocalyptic, and you're in a tribal society, and the world is overrun with these robot dinosaur creatures. And you play the game with a sense of discovery. You don't know what's happening as the story is going on. You have to discover it as it goes. It doesn't give it all to you at once. And some of the just like things that I think are in there that are would be for a good video game is there is the story of struggle, of good versus evil, and in the end, good wins. I think that is that's a prototype of stories that's got to be there for a good story. I think, I guess I would just take in like creation, fall, redemption, restoration. I think a good story is a story that could tell any of those four things: creation, fall, redemption, restoration. One of the stories Horizon Zero Dawn tells is, once you figure it out, is that human beings, through just complete waste, have destroyed the earth in such a terrible way that they had to turn to technology to save their world and create these robots to basically resurface the planet and reestablish the ecology. But what happened, you find out, is that technology really wasn't a good savior at all. It failed, and these beasts took over the world, and now you're in a world that's filled with that brokenness. And so that'd be one example of a story. I think you can even have stories that are more on the negative side, but tell something really good, like in a fair way. Like, for example, there's a game called Braid, which I loved, and it was essentially like imagine playing Mario, but the entire thing is made out of pastel paint. And you're going through the world, and the thing that you're using to play the game is that you can rewind time at any point. And so that kind of it's like a puzzle type game. You play the whole game, and it's all about getting to the end and saving the princess like Mario, right? But you get to the end, and what you realize is suddenly everything kind of unravels, and you realize that the entire game that you've played has been a living analogy for the main character, is one of the scientists on the Manhattan Project, and is now dealing with the weight and shame of inventing an atomic bomb that destroyed millions of lives. And it sneaks up on you. You're like, I didn't know this is what this was about. So that would be an example of storytelling that highlights brokenness, but I think in a good, faithful, biblical way. That death and the pursuit of technology just for the sake of it could lead to human death and destruction. That's a good part of the story to tell and to highlight and lament over. So it's not celebrated, but it's actually lamented over.
So Ryan, when he's talking about the storytelling nature of video games, I wonder how you would differentiate between video games and a good fiction book. I think I've heard you like fiction at some point. Um, or
Yeah.
or a movie. I know you
Yeah,
like
love
some
movies.
Loves
yeah,
movies.
love
There you go.
movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So differentiate between that or differentiate between a board game, which I think I've played a board game with you before.
yeah.
Like how is video games, how does that put it into this particular category where you need to be particularly concerned about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to start off, it's I'm obviously a huge fan of storytelling and love any possible way to tell a story. So I'm definitely not going to fight against that. I'd love to hear a good story, love to tell a good story. I just think when it comes to video games and to your point there, Jim, like I've really thought about the movie side of things because in my opinion, the most effective form of storytelling is a face-to-face storytelling. It's a passing down from one person to another or a passing on from one person to another. And I think there is a subsection of that is robbed in staring at a screen or participating in a story that has very little effect on your real life other than just concept or ideology. So if you take a movie, and because I love movies, I don't know, I've tried to think, I don't know if there is a huge difference between video games and movies other than I think you can isolate a time period of the stories being told from beginning, middle, end. I think in video games, it just seems to go on and on and on and on. And so it aids or adds to the addictive nature of video games in that it never really culminates. You could play the game and not really know what the story is. Like I'll give you for instance. Like so we were just talking about this earlier, but Grand Theft Auto is the number 2 game ever played. Most people that play that game would have a hard time finding the redemptive nature of that game because of what it's about. You know, it's about
breaking all of the 10 commandments.
Yes.
As fast as you can.
As fast as you can. You know, number 5 video game of all time, PlayerUnknown's Battleground. It's being dropped into an area, find as many guns and weapons as you can, and then begin to kill as many people as you can. And that's how you win points. You know, like there is you could play those games on and on and on and on and still be confused as to what the story is really telling you. So that's what I would say is the difference between a good book and a good movie is there are constructs around them that tell you have to do it a certain way. You have to begin, you have to tell something in the middle, and then you have to end it. I don't think that exists in video games. I think they just keep going and keep going and keep going. And they rob you of even maybe the ability to tell the story because you might conflict. It might be your story versus my story. It might be my opinion of the story versus yours, you know? I don't know if that's enough to start on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's good.
Let me build on that and ratchet it in form of a hard question.
Yeah.
Because you, Jake, when you were making your case, you were saying it steps it up a notch, even more than books and movies.
Yes.
Because it's saying you actually get to participate in the story.
Yes.
But Andy Crouch makes the case that stepping up a notch is actually part of the problem, in that what it ends up doing is it's such a simulation of life that it actually starts to suck you out of life. Instead of doing what humans were created to do in fruitful work, it's simulating work. And all of the neurological things that are going on when you're actually doing real work those synapses are firing in your brain, and you feel like you're doing real work. You feel like you're doing real purpose. You're really accomplishing something, or you're really building a city, or really a family, when really what you're doing is you're sitting there and you're moving your thumbs. And and actually the level of participation, does it bring it to a point to where it actually begins to replace the real life that God has intended for us?
Yeah. I mean, the answer is yes. It absolutely can do that.
Mhm.
I think this is one of those conversations that, I'm not gonna like go this direction because like the superlatives make it more fun for the argument.
Sure.
Like bad or good. But I
Yeah.
think in this conversation, it's one that I want to say yes, good, because then you can have nuance in it. And I think the Andy Crouch thing, like it, being going up a notch in simulation and involvement can be a huge problem. So I agree with that. I'll give you that. I just don't think that's enough for it to just throw out the rest of it, because there are some parts of that involvement that I think can still be good, and it can tell stories, and it can create experiences that you couldn't otherwise, right? Like, for example, I'd say people are going to hate me on this, but like, I think playing FIFA is silly. Go play a soccer game. I think playing Madden is not the best use of video games. It can be, because I've seen good examples of like a whole party of people laughing and playing FIFA as this joined experience. And I think it's probably nothing really different than like a Monopoly game where everybody's laughing.
So you think shooting people and breakdancing, that's better?
No.
Well, that's Fortnite.
Shoot people breakdancing.
Is that not Fortnite? Is there some other part of Fortnite I'm missing?
Yeah, that is Fortnite.
If a group of people were to go play soccer, great. If a group of people were to go breakdance and shoot people, we got a problem.
Yeah, totally. Well, Fortnite's just the one that we decided to pick for Ryan to play. I don't really play it much, but I'd say like there are some the way that Fortnite's like a mix, bad and good. One, it's been designed to be highly addictive for the reasons that you guys named, in that there's no end to the story. It's designed to perpetually be played, and it makes use of color and visual stimulus in the most highly addictive ways. So I think that video games are akin to something like drugs. Like, morphine has a very good potent use in creation, but it needs to be highly limited and controlled. And I think video games are the same way.
You might want to clarify what that is. What's the good purpose of morphine?
Yeah, if you're getting in a car accident and you like have a steel rod plunge through your leg, and the EMTs can get there in time, and your agonizing pain is contributing to like one of the most traumatic experiences of your life, and they can't even begin to treat you because you're in so much. An injection of morphine is brilliant.
Yeah.
And very helpful and loving and good in that way. But to get morphine to be made into like the cheapest version that we can, and then to throw it onto the street just for the sake of like, I want to feel high, highly dangerous, very life destructive. So
what would be the context in which morphine has a specific use, just like you described?
Yep.
What is the very specific isolated use? Because you could argue right now that if video games are morphine, they have been diluted and passed out on the street to everybody.
I think absolutely.
And which when you talked about morphine, that's extremely destructive. So if video games are at an extremely destructive state in society, as far as the way they're being used, what is the actual use or intention, do you think, for video games?
Yeah. So when you were saying like how video games go on and on and on, that is a horrible version of storytelling. And I don't think that that's just in video game. I think that's prevalent in society right now. Netflix is the perfect example. I mean, I'm running of like just as many people who are addicted to Netflix binging, men and women, because the story is designed to go on and on and on and on and on and on. The next show, because it's a monetary value. So I think a good example of like video games would be the video game has a start and it has an end. And it doesn't go on into infinity. And it's not in this endless loop of, so something that video games uses this fake type of reward system, a lot of them, to get you to get this tiny invisible reward to feel a dopamine rush and then moving on to the next thing again and again and again and again and again. Wherever that's prevalent in video games, it's usually something to be highly aware of and very much restricted because it's very powerful. So I know that's I'm like arguing against myself now for video games.
I may not have to talk very
you don't
much.
Have to, I'm just gonna like say it myself, But I wouldn't like look at Netflix and say like movie series are bad or shows are horrible and we should throw them out. I would say there's examples of good ones and bad ones, and we should be highly, as Christians, like thoughtful and questioning and asking why it's good, why it's bad, what's it doing to me as I watch it, what time goes into it. I think video games is one of those things that you need to have very good restrictions on them and ask why. And I think you need a better set of questions when it comes to engaging.
So let me maybe make an attempt to answering your question and then throwing it back on you. So first, a story. When I was, I don't know, probably 11 or 12, the Madden video game, which Jake crapped on for no reason.
I know.
It came out, and then over the course of the summer, a bunch of the guys played Madden. And then we came back to the football season that year, and our coaches were dumbfounded because we knew twice as much strategy as all of our football coaches. We knew plays that they had never heard of because all summer long we had been essentially simulating and practicing play calling and all these sorts of things. Our football knowledge exponentially increased. Now, Jane McConigal, I think that's her name, she writes this, she wrote a book and she has some TED Talks about the role that gamification can play in formation. I mean, I've even experienced this. Like part of the way that I've lost weight and done different things at times has been making a little game out of it, right? It's the reward system and everything like that. What if there were games that were focusing, I think some do, teach people about business and economics, teach people about maybe even anatomy or how to perform a surgery. I would love it if people were playing some of the doctors doing some little simulations where it's a low cost sorts of things. Yeah. Even the way that some of the surgeries are done now actually do simulate a lot of video games. It's happening on a screen with a joystick.
Yep.
And so all that to say is I wonder if Al Wolters, one of the theologians we respect a lot, if he wouldn't say that this is an issue of structure versus direction, that most video games that are out there are focused on some pretty dumb things, but that doesn't mean that the actual structure of the thing itself is bad. It's just the way that it's being used or the direction is bad. So I'm curious what you would say to that. Is there anything with video games that makes them inherently wrong, or it's just the way that they're being used and the types of games that are out there?
Yeah. I mean, it's very hard for me to argue that in a simulation type way that video games couldn't be used for something good. I do think they can be used for that. And to me, the most prevalent example of that would be a flight simulator. Because you make a mistake learning how to fly, you're dead. You make a mistake in a simulator, you get another shot at learning that. And so I think that can be extremely helpful. I think, and it is hard to argue the structure versus direction, but I think it's hard to argue that in almost everything in life.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it more from, I don't think there's anything essential in video games versus like if you removed video games out of that category, the world wouldn't be a better or a worse place. Actually, if you take video games in their current state, the world would be a better place, I think. And you just could look at the top 10 video games and realize that's probably true about video games. They'd be a better place. But I don't think you need video games in order to do the things that you're doing. You just could use them because they're there. Somebody invented them, you could use them. The same way you use anything else in life. But if you removed, like, I'll tell a quick story. And I hope this applies, but like, in the top 10, Tetris has two different games that are the number 3 game of all time and the number 10 game of all time are two different forms of Tetris. You know, like, if you play Tetris all day, it can be stimulating to your mind, but it produces nothing out in the real world. So in order to, we homeschool still 2 of our youngest kids. I decided I'm going to play Tetris with them. So what we did was we built a 10-foot, then 50-foot pathway into our backyard, and I let my kids develop the pattern, and then they laid it out like Tetris, and it had to fit mathematically. And then we went into our backyard, and we built a patio back there, and again, mathematically had to fit. My son had to make 30 to 50 cuts with a diamond blade to get it exactly the right measurements in there. So essentially, I played Tetris with my son and my daughter for 3 months. We completed something, and people will be able to sit there, eat there, walk into my backyard without getting a thorn in their foot or whatever for as long as somebody leaves it there. And you can look at that and go, we created something that affects your real life. If I had to play Tetris with them all day, it wouldn't have necessarily produced anything other than a concept that you could do that.
So you're saying you can sit there and play Tetris with zeros and ones, or you could use kind of the same mental faculties to make a patio or build a wall.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. What would you say to that, Jake?
I think it's a one or the other argument when, like, you're arguing that real life experiences or video games, and I think it needs to be a both and. Like, there's an option that's not video games and in your house all day long, not having real life experiences, or you're outside and you're engaged in real life. And I don't think that that's reality. I think you have the opportunity to be able to do both. I'll give you another. Go ahead.
Well, okay, no, go ahead, and then I'll say,
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I think the both is, like, for one thing I've seen lately, this has been really cool, is Will got Zelda
You
for
keep
his
throwing
kids. I keep
Will?
throwing Will out here, and I know
Yeah.
well, he's where I play the video games with the most. He's the person that I watch him do video games with his children.
Yeah.
In a season of life where I had video games, but I had no guidance or instruction. And I see him doing a really good job. So both his boys are at a place where they are learning and growing in how to read. And so what's the best way to read? Just read more books. That is the best way to learn how to read, is to read more. But for 2 young boys who are learning to read, and there can be difficulties or even anxieties in reading out loud, things. Here's what I just noticed. The entire game of Zelda, the story must be read in little dialogue boxes. There's accompanying sounds, very stimulating pictures. It's a beautiful world. Because the video game is all those things, highly stimulating to all the senses, the incentive for the boys to read out loud is astronomically higher than they would feel for like a book. And so they, as dads, made it the rule. Like, you're playing the game, you have to read everything out loud. So they came over to the house the other day, we were watching them, and they were reading the entire time. And so it doesn't need to be a one or the other. Like, they need to learn to read, so the only option is this. It could be a both and, like, you can. One of the things that they've discovered is that people who play 3D video games from childhood up are statistically more successful at complex chemistry. because they have, you cannot visualize a molecule in real life down to the level that you need to perform organic chemistry. It's too small. But you can, with 3D playing video games, develop a skill in your mind to be able to take an object and rotate it in your mind on all sides. That's a skill that helps you be a doctor, create pharmaceuticals, like create chemicals that can help like preserve foods, like all those things. But the skill can be developed in ways using technology like a video game that you couldn't actually do otherwise. So.
All right, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna wrap up, but I'm gonna give you each a minute or two to just give some pastoral wisdom to those who are sorting through their own video game engagement or that of their children or whatever it is. So some pastoral wisdom. You want to start us off, Ryan?
Sure. Yeah, I would just say the inevitability that you're going to run into with interacting with video games seems really high. We said 92% of all people are going to engage in video games or even own a video game system. So I think you have to introduce your kids to what video games are, what they do. The thing that I would say, and Jake said earlier, there has to be an intentional limitation put on how you use them and the purpose behind them. And so if you can't find creational good, if you can't find redemption, restoration, I would say veer away from the games that are telling that story and veer more toward the games that are telling a good story. In order to do that, you probably have to spend some time understanding what your kids are doing and what you're doing. Part of it would be confront whether or not you personally have an addiction to video games or to a form of technology that you're abusing because your kids are going to watch that.
Yep.
And make sure you put limitations on yourself first so that they're mimicking what you're doing.
It's good. How about you, Jake?
Yeah, I think I would just throw out rules, like things that would help create limitations, like you had said. Questions I would ask would be, does the game have echoes of the biblical story, or does it tell a story that would be contrast and unhealthy? Does it create community or isolation? And each game can kind of do both. So I think it really depends on what kind of rules you create around it. And can you make it tie to real life? Because they're so highly stimulating and at times addicting, they can be used for gamification and reward systems. One of the things I did for a while is I wanted to write. So I would say for every hour that I wrote, I would have an hour of video game time at the end of the week. And that made me write more than anything. So you can use some of those things. I'd say like you got to be able to ask questions and engage on where it's good. And one thing that I'd probably caveat to Ryan is if you can't do the work to like ask those questions and discern what's good, like I would probably just say throw them out.
Well, you guys are both wise, and at different times I was won over between both of you. Respect you guys a ton. For those who are listening, chime in. Let us know who won this debate, because I'd really like to see either one of those things happen. I think Ryan playing Fortnite would be hilarious, and I've been really rooting for Jake to get the mustache shaved. So anyway, everyone, thanks for listening in. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the All of Life podcast. To get more information on Redemption Church Tempe, you can download the Redemption Tempe app, or you can send an email to tempe@redemptionaz.com.